This is Steve Lucas and his wife, Jean, and they have an Oklahoma chestnut. So they have been trying to figure out how to grow things here in Oklahoma, and tried some things that didn't work, and then found chestnuts and realized it's this opportunity, this huge opportunity, I think. I don't want to steal too much, but they have quite a story, traveling all over the country and even to China and back to find the specific varieties of chestnut that actually will flourish here in Oklahoma. So we're really excited to be here, and an amazing wealth of knowledge about how to do this and what not to do, those good learning experiences too. So I'll turn it over with that.
Thank you. and I really appreciate Julie and Nick pulling this together. I guess Julie and I met for the first time 2011-ish, 2012, and it's just one of those serendipitous things, as she was mentioning earlier, is you just, one person knows another, and all of a sudden, you know, you get together and, you know, you talk about chestnuts and things just kind of balloon from there. And I appreciate everybody who's here today. Yeah, we've had an interesting ride. I mean, it's been a good ride. You saw my amazing sugar maples out there, so that was the start of the growing. You remember those? You forgot already? Okay, good. But anyhow, I thought I'd just take a few minutes to kind of explain how we got to where we are now, because everybody has a different story and everybody has a different path, and those things happen in life that send you in different directions, and some maybe can relate to, some you haven't approached yet, and who knows what the other direction might be. But in 2005, I had to take another direction. The work I was doing and so forth required me to go another direction. So we had another house that was on the back side of the property, or on the front side of the property you're going to see. And somebody came up and said, "Hey, can we buy it from you?" And I had a couple major surgeries. I'm thinking, yeah, it's kind of neat. If you want to buy my house, we'll go somewhere else, you know. So we ultimately, as I was telling you earlier, we thought we were building our retirement home over there. We put in a nice road and got our home over there. Then about 3 years later, I got a call from where I went to college and said, "Would you come back and teach?" I thought, well, you don't understand. We just built this, but okay. That was one of my life goals. I had 3 of them, and one was to go back and teach at the Christian college that I went to. Just a great learning environment. So I did that and went there in August, and February 28th we sold the house, and then April 1st there was a 30% staff and reduction in professors.
Wow.
Life altering, just go with the flow. So my wife was still teaching elementary school here. We had a senior in high school who didn't want to leave Chandler for that. So I came back in May and figured, what are we going to do? So we built the 3-car garage and the mother-in-law suite. Well, what am I going to do? And so I had planted some fruit trees out there back in '07, I guess it was, and they were down by the pond, and they were doing okay. But I had somebody from Noble Foundation come out, that you really need to move those up to the top of the hill if you want them to be any level of success. So I did, and I added a couple hundred other things with them. And I thought, you know, of these 30 different varieties of species and cultivars of fruit, something's got to be successful. And the amazing thing was, everything but the cherries were growing great. You'll see some jujubes if you're familiar with them, Asian pears, 5 varieties of apples, what else? 4 varieties of peaches, apricots, nectarines, plums. We got plums for the first time this year. So that's all kind of exciting stuff, but the reality of it is, unless you want to do a U-pick, it's really tough to get a lot of volume, you know, and if you're looking to do something just above that hobby grade, where you have a little income coming in, I was still in search of something else. And of course the state tree is the pecan, and, you know, sure, Steve, put your pecans everywhere. And the problem is, I don't know what kind of land you have. And you may have the most lush bottom land that goes flat forever, and you can just put them everywhere here in those pecans, and life will be great with that sandy, loamy soil that everybody has. Well, you will see, as Brian alluded to, you go 10 feet in any direction, it's either sandy, rocky, clay, or all the above. And that's not conducive to pecans. And quite frankly, it's really not conducive, or I was told it wasn't conducive to a lot of the stuff that I was growing here. But literally about 2 o'clock one night, or morning I guess it would be, I was on the internet and they said something about chestnuts in Missouri. And this university had done about 20 years of research. I thought, Missouri? Yeah, that's a neighboring state. Why don't I go up and look at it? And Gene and I went up, and pretty knowledgeable stuff up there. I mean, they had beautiful trees that, I mean, they're as big as this oak tree right here. And that was at 22 years of age. And I'm thinking, wow. And then they start talking about the opportunity. And it is considered a niche by most folks. But the interesting thing about it is that 90% of the chestnuts that are consumed in the U.S. are imported. And there's only really one good reason for that, is because nobody's growing chestnuts. Because it is kind of a small niche, people don't want to put a lot of time and effort into it, and each location requires different varieties, which I've learned. So anyhow, fast forward a little bit here. For some of you who may have heard this a time or two, I apologize. But in 2010, we go up, and this nursery that had been working in conjunction with University of Missouri said, we think these varieties will work well for you. So we got 600 of those grafted trees, 4-foot tall trees. I think y'all are starting to realize that this is an investment, it's no longer a hobby. And so we put them out here, and put them on the spacing they said, and that was November of 2010. And by August of 2011, we had 35 of them live still. Wow, that's exciting stuff, isn't it? Well, a couple of things, key learnings. Number one, the University of Missouri was extremely clear and upfront with me at first. They said, we know for this ground, on this tract of land, it will grow chestnuts, and these varieties will grow, and they're completely forthright with that. And then when I went to the nursery, that's where it kind of became a little bit of an issue, because they not only wanted to sell the trees, but they wanted to tell you how to grow them. And I listened. They said you put about 5 gallons of water when you put them on the ground in November, and then about May you'll come back and you put a little water on them, and maybe 5 gallons a week in July, August, September. Well, this isn't Missouri, is it? And what was happening in 2011? Do you remember the weather was like? Yeah, it was like, was that the record?
That's when mine went in the ground.
Yeah, and that was close to the record year of 100-degree plus days. And if it wasn't, it was 2012 and 2010. So you had a series of terrible drought periods. So I listened to them through March, and they were just already starting to dwindle. You could tell they weren't doing too good. I picked out a few and watered them. And anyway, so he agreed to provide some more, and we got about 400 more that next fall. And we're August of 2012. We had 70 trees still alive, and I'm thinking there's got to be something that I'm missing. I'd been up to Connecticut, I'd been up to Ohio, which had the largest orchard in the U.S. Still do, been on to Florida, these different places are doing it, and I'm seeing people doing it in different grounds, but it's just not happening with us. So I thought, well, I don't have enough frequent flyer miles, may I combine them with some other things and get to China and see what's going on there. So I contacted, it's like an A&M school there in central China. And the reason I chose that area was twofold. Number one, it had the highest per cap consumption and production of chestnuts in the world. And the second thing was they have everything from mountaintops and ridges to arid areas. And by the time I got there, I spent, I think it was 9 days actually in the area and so forth. And they were growing them everywhere. And that's what kind of blew me away. How can they grow them on mountaintops when it's supposed to be too cold, or down almost, I'm going to say New Mexico. I mean, where it's extremely arid and not a whole lot of water. But they had, I mean, we think of a long time as a decade, or a century is a long time, but Oklahoma's, what, 100 and some odd years old. To them, that's like grandparents. I mean, they think of millennial. I mean, they had data going back 3,000 years about chestnuts. They had trees that were 4 foot wide. They were over 400 years old. They were chestnuts. So they had a lot of data, a lot of research, and just a lot of neat things were happening. So basically I tried to find as close as I could mostly the clay influence, because that's the real killer. That's really tough to grow anything in clay. We looked at the varieties and cultivars that they had for those areas. And you cannot import from China to grow anything in the U.S. And that, I don't know when that ban started, 20, 30, 40 years ago, but for the American chestnut fans, back in 1905, we imported some Chinese chestnuts, and one of them was a parasite that killed all the American chestnuts. Just kind of an interesting side note there. But in doing that, and for the next 20 or 30 years, we got all these different varieties of chestnuts, cultivars. So basically, I learned what cultivars and varieties they were growing in a clay type of environment that we have, and I literally traced them in different parts of our country to figure out who had them, where they were, and so forth. And also, the University of Missouri had some of those varieties too. So I spent the next couple of years just trying to evaluate about 80 different varieties to see what could make it here. So really, you're going to see an orchard that some of the trees, a few of the trees are 5 years old. Some are 4 years old, many of them are 2 and 3 years old, and some are a year old. So you're going to see all different kind of varieties. But the key thing I want to share with you is that it caused me to not only grow chestnuts, but it's also caused me to learn how to grow them in an orchard, but also how to grow them from seed. And that is really what happened and helped us out a lot. But like I say, we've got other fruit trees. Pawpaws, somebody's talking about that. We've got some of them now in our one of the hoop houses. Asian pears in there, jujubes. We're looking at trifoliate orange, contorted, if that means anything to you. Because we're looking for natural barriers to keep those critters out of the orchard. It'll take a lot of them, but we're looking at something other than, we really don't want to have to put up high dollar fences and so forth. That's kind of the starting point. Do you have questions that I can try to answer now or show you while we're going around and so forth? Make it simple.
So you grow from seed, and then you had a lot of losses from your grafted stock. Do you have recommendations on grafting or not grafting, or a certain type of root stock, or just grow it from seed? What have you learned?
Yeah, you kind of alluded to something that I really didn't come out and say, but which is true. The reasons for the loss in the first year to 2 years, I think for the first year was, yes, we're in a drought, and that's part of it, but 6 out of 6 is good for a drought year, wasn't it? Okay.
Oh, that was 6 out of 12.
Oh, well, okay, that's not quite as good, but it's still better than my, 3.5%. It's still. What I really learned the first year was that do not listen to growers in other parts of the country. Get as local as you can as far as how to grow something. I truly believe that if I would have started watering, well, it would have been tougher anyways. If I would have started watering earlier, that I would have saved more of them. As it turns out, many of the cultivars were not compatible for the clay soil. So I still would have lost a pretty good amount. But you asked, the other part of the question is the grafted aspect. And I visited 5 of the largest volume chestnut orchards in the U.S. And I wanted to find out what cultivars they were using. And it turns out they're all using seedlings. They had identified those that had done best in their area, and then used room for seed. And the reason for that was, and what University of Missouri is learning and really expanded upon over the past 5 or 6 years, is you talk about rootstock. And we don't have enough good data to understand what is a good rootstock. And they've got failures all the time. And that's, it's one thing to lose a tree after 6 months or a year, but to lose them after 10, 12, 15, 20 years, and that they literally fall off where that graft was, and just because of that incompatibility of the two. So that's why when I'm going to call it research, but I don't have a doctorate. It's not so much that I have knowledge, but I've got a lot of experiences. Hopefully it translates into some knowledge too. But what we found is that if you have the right seed off of a particular cultivar that you're shooting for, you're going to get 95% of it there. And you just keep that and grow that. Would I ever go back to grafting? Absolutely. But I will graft only what's been successful and graft it onto similar seedlings here at the place.
Yeah.
That's probably the safest way to go. Any other questions?